Hi, welcome back to my channel. My name's Corinne and this is my April wrap up. So this month I actually ended up in a bit of a reading slump. I only read 3 physical books, but I did do a lot of audiobooks. So we've got 8 to talk about today. Quite a few despite the slump, so let's just get into it, shall we? First I read Conform by Ariel Sullivan and I loved it. This was so much fun. I did do a review on it a couple of weeks ago, so if you want to hear more, go and watch that. But this is basically an arranged marriage kind of book in a dystopian romance. Our main character is put in an arranged marriage with an elite who lives up in the clouds in these tall buildings, and they have this breeding contract together. It's not gory, it's not like The Handmaid's Tale, it's slightly sinister, but a little bit more light, a little bit more young adult coded, even though it is an adult book, new adult. But it's not harrowing. It's quite an easy read despite what it sounds like from the subject matter, as well as this romance with this man in the arranged marriage. Our main character also meets a bit of a rebel, a major defect in the society. The society is kind of organized into elites, minor defects, and major defects. She meets this rebel, major defect, and has a bit of a romance with him as well. So it's a bit of a love triangle, and it's very reminiscent of the YA dystopian genre. It's a lot like Matched. It's got some Hunger Games vibes with the Capitol and the prep team, and it's a bit like Delirium as well. It's not as good as the Hunger Games, of course, but I do think it's a little bit better than Matched and Delirium. And I had so much fun. So before I even finished Conform, I went out and I pre-ordered Beneath, which is a prequel, and it came out while I was reading Conform. So this series, if you haven't watched my other 2 videos about these books, is a trilogy of trilogies. So Conform is book 1 of a trilogy, Beneath is book 1 of a prequel trilogy, and there's a third trilogy going to come out. Don't know when it's set, there's no information on it. And they're all going to tie in together, and it's all set within the same kind of world. Beneath is a prequel set about 200 years before Conform. It's in this big silo, this big nuclear bunker, about 6 years after a nuclear winter has occurred. And our main character is traumatized. She works as a medic, and she kind of gets looped into the military, into this plot where they have to go out into the nuclear apocalypse and find supplies for their silo that is running out. And there's a romance with a handsome military leader guy. This one wasn't as fun as Conform. It actually put me in quite a reading slump, and I just filmed a video all about my thoughts on it, kind of ranting about it, honestly, because I found it really disappointing. I thought it was going to be more exciting, like especially going out into the world into a nuclear apocalypse. That sounds like it's going to be exciting, but it was just kind of slow, kind of dull. A lot of the focus of the book was Sasha's trauma, which I think is interesting. I like stories about trauma, but it didn't go deep enough for me to really like do that well. And being in her head all the time where she just hates everyone, hates herself, and is really self-sabotaging and having a lot of negative self-talk does kind of wear on you after a while. There was some redeeming qualities, like there was a nice found family kind of vibe. The romantic storyline was quite good. It was just the bigger plot that I felt was lacking, and that impacted the pacing quite a lot. It made it feel quite slow. It feels like a lot of the story just happens in this silo. And I don't know, I just expected a bit more craziness, a bit more excitement. And I was left underwhelmed. I will be continuing with the series because I loved Conform so much. So I definitely want to finish that trilogy. And I'm probably going to get curious enough to get book 2 of this. But if it wasn't related to Conform, I would definitely DNF the series. Like, this just, it wasn't giving, and I wanted so much for it to give. But alas, it was a miss. And then I read Red Rising, which didn't disappoint. This was the thrilling action excitement that I wanted from Beneath and more. Everyone says this is like the Hunger Games in space, and I have to agree. It had a lot of Hunger Games vibes. A lot of the society in this book is very inspired by the ancient Romans. The book is set on Mars. We follow Darrow, who starts out as a red, working in the mines as a slave. He thinks he's mining this material to terraform Mars and be like the frontiers, going ahead of all of the other people in society, forging a path to make Mars livable. But it turns out that is all a lie, and he is a slave that's being fed lies to keep him compliant. there's actually already a thriving society, and they are very elite in giving the capital in the Hunger Games. Everyone is kind of genetically distinct, so there are different colours. Darrow is a red, but there's also the golds, the pinks, the greys, etc. They all have different functions in the society, and they have kind of a hierarchy. And as you can tell from the title, Red Rising, he kind of rises up the hierarchy. And I don't want to say more because I don't want to spoil it, but there's a Hunger Games style plot that happens for most of the book. There's this idea of rising up against oppressors, which is also very Hunger Games. And I loved it. I really enjoyed it. I think I still prefer the Hunger Games, but I have only read book one of this and I've bought the next two, so I'm going to read them. They form kind of a trilogy, and then there's three further books, so it's quite a long series, but I know the first three make up kind of an arc, a trilogy arc. And I think the final book in the series is coming out later this year. So I'm going to take my time because I'm going to want to get them in paperback, get that one in paperback. So I think this year I'll read the trilogy, and then maybe next year, once I've got through more of the books on my shelf, I will read the next lot. But I would recommend it. It was a lot of fun. However, it is more adult than the Hunger Games. There is a lot of violence and assaults and things like that that happen. Don't want to say too much, but yeah, trigger warning probably if you're someone that needs trigger warnings. But I loved it. It was great, very exciting, and also lots of like good drama and heart wrenching moments and sadness, and yeah, it kind of has everything that you need. It had philosophical moments, it was politically aware, it had deeper themes. Tick, 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 tick. That being said, I was still in a bit of a slump. It took me like 2 solid weeks to read all of this, and it's quite small. I would normally read that a bit quicker. I was busy. I was away for the weekend. I got really tired. I've been writing a lot. So I'm not going to go straight on to book two, even though I am really intrigued to see where it goes. I just think I'm not quite in the mood for this now. I'm going to go on and read some horror next, I think, but yeah, I'll probably get to this later in the summer because I don't want to forget too much about what happened in this book before going on to book two and three. But yeah, my slump was definitely not the book's fault. It was a leftover slump from beneath, honestly. But there we go. Then on to audiobooks. I listened to The Wind Singer, which is one of my favourite middle grade books, and a book I used to listen to an audiobook as a child repeatedly. I used to like play Spiral and listen to it, and for some reason, I think because I was a bit burned out and tired, I was playing Spyro anyway, and I thought, you know what, I'm just going to give The Wind Singer a little re listen and see how it stands up as an adult. And it stood up really well. This is kind of a fantasy dystopian story. It's set in Aramanth, which is a city of rings where it's different colours, and where you're placed depends on how well you perform in tests. So the whites are the super elites. We've got red, orange, which is where our main character lives at the beginning, which is kind of modest, normal houses. Maroon, which are flats, and grey, which are these tower blocks where multiple families share a flat. They test people from like literally the moment they turn a year old. The opening chapter is her younger sister as a baby, kind of being tested and judged on her developmental milestones, whether she's toilet trained, whether she can respond to questions and smile and laugh and things like that. And it's quite sinister, like this society based so heavily on how you perform. It's very much discriminatory against people that have developmental problems or learning difficulties, which I didn't understand as a middle grade reader, but I do now. It doesn't really go heavily into that because it is middle grade, so it's quite surface level, but honestly, I still think this book, in a show don't tell kind of way, has way more interesting themes than some of the young adult and new adult books I've read recently. Like, the main characters go on this quest to get the voice of the wind singer back, and they come across like different cultures as they go through, and they come across like two warring tribes, and that has kind of a lot to say about the nature of war and how these societies are kind of non-violent, and they kind of have proxy wars with these land ships that they send out, but their whole society is built around being warriors, and if they weren't in a war with this other tribe, everything would just kind of fall apart within that society because that is kind of the backbone of it. And I thought that was a really interesting commentary. They also come across these mud people who, in the beginning of the story are kind of showed to our main character Kestrel as where you don't want to end up. Like, this is the worst it could get. And then when they escape Aramanth, they end up going through this mud city, and these people are actually really happy, really jolly. They live great lives. Just because it doesn't look the best from where they are in Aramanth doesn't mean that it isn't the best. Like, it's actually a great place to live. So I feel like that kind of taught middle grade readers to not always judge other cultures just by how they look to us, because actually what they're doing makes sense to them and they are perfectly happy. I thought that was really cool. And yeah, the ending of the book, it falls apart a little bit, but there's still some great fantasy elements. There's still some great action, and yeah, it's kind of got everything. It's got lovable characters. It was a really quick but compelling listen. I loved it. I had great fun, and it was, yeah, a nice little relaxing diversion for me. And then I listened to Before and After and Flesh and Blood, which is a duology by Andrew Shanahan, I want to say. And oh my god, I love this so, so much. Before and After is about Ben, who is over £600 and he is stuck in his flat. He's agoraphobic, but he also physically can't get out of his flat. And a team of firemen come to lift him out of the flat with a crane because he has to go and get his leg amputated because he's got diabetes. He has to go to the hospital. And just as he's about to be winched out of his flat, a kind of zombie apocalypse type disaster occurs, and he's stuck strapped to this stretcher basically. And there's all of these rage kind of zombies about on the street outside the flat. And it's kind of about how he survives this apocalypse despite all of his massive physical challenges, like just being that size, having diabetes, and having a leg that needs to come off. He has all of these sores and things like that because he can't wash properly. It's probably very triggering if you have an eating disorder or you're overweight or you're sensitive about any of those kind of topics. So I wouldn't recommend it for people that don't want to read about that. However, I found it really compelling. I had like such strong empathy for Ben, and we have before and after chapters showing him in the present day during this apocalypse, but also flashing back to his normal life and how he kind of got to this place, how he got to this weight, and how he stopped going out of his flat and became agoraphobic. He also has this adorable little dog called Brown. She's an amazing character in herself, and we really root for her too. And a lot of what keeps Ben going, why he wants to survive and why he fights so hard to survive, is just to take care of his dog and give his dog a good life, which was really heartwarming. I loved her. I loved her and Ben, and he was kind of a complex character. He had his flaws, of course, but I still had so much empathy for him, and I don't think I've read or listened to a book in a while that had me so emotional. Like, I think I cried at multiple points. I cried at the end. I was just like really panicked and wanting him to be okay throughout the whole thing, really rooting for him and just wanting the best for him. And I found it really touching. One of the only, like, maybe criticisms I have is that he survives so long with no food because basically he just gets skinnier and skinnier because he's got a lot of fat to burn. I think someone of that size wouldn't just survive basically starvation by getting skinnier and skinnier. There would probably be a lot of malnutrition issues. And I don't know if that's the best message, that in order to get to a healthy weight, you have to just stop eating and starve. I don't think that's very good or very realistic. However, I can forgive it. I still really love the story, but that is kind of why I wouldn't recommend this book for anyone that struggles with eating disorders or struggles with the topic of weight in any way. And book two, I don't want to spoil because it kind of spoils book one, but it's a continuation of the story. We introduce a new character. We're still following Ben and Brown, and they're kind of facing new body horror kind of challenges. This is very much of the horror genre. Like, the zombies themselves are horrific, but also there's a lot of body horror that goes on with just being that size and losing a lot of weight and injuries and things like that. So yeah, not for the sensitive reader, but one of my favourites of the year. 5 stars, loved it. Then for book club, I read Murder Bimbo as an audiobook. This is a book that's quite new out. It's a debut author, and it's about a sex worker who assassinates a politician, basically. And the politician is a piece of shit, and he's very much like, you can tell it's supposed to be Trump, but it's just a fictionalized version. The story is told via email over 3 acts, and the email is to different characters each time. So, Act 1, she's basically emailing this podcaster who does true crime podcasts, and she's kind of telling her side of the story because she thinks she's going to get arrested for her assassination. And she kind of tells us a bit of her story, tells us a bit of her motives, and you kind of see how it all goes down, and you're like, yeah, okay, I guess I understand why you did that. That makes sense. And she tells her story in a very sympathetic light. And then in Act 2, I don't want to say too much because I don't want to spoil it, but she emails someone else and she portrays herself in a different way. And she portrays the story and what happens in a different way again, that's a little bit less sympathetic to her. And Act 3, we get another alternate version of events. And I thought this was kind of interesting. She was the most unreliable of narrators. She was pretty much a narcissist. And we don't even know if Act 3 is the true version of events. You pretty much can't trust anything this character says. And I think it really makes you confront your own political beliefs and perhaps your justification of this kind of violence against politicians. I, for one, don't support the idea of politically assassinating anyone, so I wasn't really on board with this book from the beginning. And by the end of the book, I can't even tell if it's in support of doing that or critical of doing that. It was quite a confronting and conflicting read, that's all I say. And I think it's designed to make you a bit uncomfortable, and it definitely made me uncomfortable at times, which I think can be the mark of good fiction. But to be honest, I didn't really enjoy this book too much. Maybe just because of the subject matter. I don't know. It didn't really hit for me. I wanted to enjoy it more. And I'm not one of these people who says, like, just because you didn't like the main character, you don't like the book, because I really loved Yellowface by R.F. Kuang, and you're following an absolute arsehole of a main character and you're in her head. So it's not that I didn't like the book because I didn't like being in the main character's head. I don't know. I think this book is just a tricky one. I wouldn't rate it too low because I think it was good and I think it probably did what it was intending to do. But I didn't have fun. I wouldn't reread it, and I'm left feeling a bit conflicted. And another fun fact about this book, it was supposed to be called Someone Had to Do It, and then the publisher changed the title to Murder Bimbo, kind of in a panic, very last minute, because just about when this was going to print, Charlie Kirk was assassinated. So it was a little bit of life imitating art, and this book was fully kind of written before that happened. And I think that having happened after this book being written, I think that does change the flavour of it. I think it does affect the book and the reception and how it comes across, because it means you're kind of thinking about that incident going into the book. However, the book was never written with the intention of you thinking about Charlie Kirk and that assassination. It's just complete chance that those things happen to co occur around about the same time. And yeah, I think that makes for interesting conversation, because when you're talking about an assassination like that, when it's hypothetical, that's one thing, but when it's actually happened and you've got quite a concrete example, it's kind of another thing entirely. So if that hadn't have happened, I might have had a different opinion on the book. Who knows? But yeah, I kind of feel for Rebecca Novak because it's her first book, and that happening, oh, probably gave her quite a lot of anxiety having to change the name. Oh, yeah. I don't know how I would feel about that if it were me. I'd probably want to push the publication of the book back even more, just to have more distance from the event, so there's less association. Because regardless of like how you feel about the person who was killed, you don't want it to look like you're like dancing on someone's grave. I don't think that's a good look at all. So anyway, moving on. The final book I read via audiobook was Assassin's Apprentice by Robin Hobb. This is an absolute classic in the fantasy genre. Everyone loves Robin Hobb and this whole series. This is a trilogy, but there's also another couple of trilogies and a quadret all linked in the same world. So if I choose to continue, this is book one in a very long series, and I really enjoyed this. This is a book mainly about our main character, Fitz. We see a lot of his childhood, some of his magic. He has this kind of magical communication bonding ability with animals, particularly dogs. He's the bastard of a prince, which forces that prince to abdicate the throne because bastards are kind of a big moral shame for the royalty, unlike in Game of Thrones, where there are lots of bastards and some kings that don't care about having bastards. This is a big deal in this society, so that makes Fitz kind of unpopular because this prince was really beloved and would have been a great ruler. He is trained up by the king to be an assassin by this man that teaches him to be an assassin. He's called Shade. And he also learns other skills, something called the skill, which is a magical ability, which I won't get into. He learns a lot about taking care of horses and dogs from Burrick, who kind of raises him in the stables. Burrick really hates this power he has to bond with animals, so he really tries to stamp that out of him, and that causes them a lot of conflict. And there's this like red ships plot that also happens kind of in the background of this book. That's kind of set up for book two, I think. But yeah, I really enjoyed this. I thought it was a good first book. It was a good introduction to the world. It did very much feel like an introduction. Like, we just get to know Fitz and he learns lots of different things. We learn about the world a little bit. There were some sad moments related to animals. I won't say any more, but that felt a bit manipulative, honestly, and I'm not happy. I'm gonna riot because, like, why would you do that? I wish more bad things had happened to the human characters instead. But there we go. And I think that's all I can say without spoilers. But I liked it. Will I read the rest of the series? I think so. Not right now. Um, I've actually gone back to the Soulbound series. I'm doing Tainted Can now. But I will read book two and three in the trilogy, I think. I'm not like desperate to, I'm not rushing onto it, but it was a good time, so why not? But I am glad I did the audiobook because I think for me, just personally, it was probably a bit slow for me to physically read, which is the case for lots of fantasy for me, to be honest. Unless it's romantasy, I have learned that I'm just better off doing the audiobook. So that's good. I'm glad we have audiobooks because otherwise I think I would miss out on a lot of these stories. And it's not that I don't like them, it's just that I'm a slow reader, so thick books at a slower pace don't suit me so well, especially when it's a fantasy and you have to like learn a lot about the world. You have to kind of keep up momentum, otherwise you forget things. So if you're only reading like 20 pages a day or so, it takes forever to get through and then you lose interest. So I will continue this series as an audiobook. And I know some people say the audiobooks for this series aren't good, but I thought it was fine. I liked it, so I've got no complaints. Anyway, thanks for watching. Let me know if you read any of these books and what you thought of them. So subscribe, tune in for more book videos, book reviews, talks about writing and what I'm reading. And don't forget to follow me on Instagram as well. Thanks for watching. Bye!